Hi everybody, this is Derek with Ted Lare Garden Center, and Melissa's behind the camera.
Hey guys!
And today we're doing our houseplant series, and I'm going to cover transplanting because I found a plant I want to take home, and I'm going to show you how to do it while I transplant it in a pot that I found.
Awesome.
So I was going to try to pronounce it, but I think I'll just show the name. It's a super cool Hoya, and just look at the leaves. I was so excited about it. I had to have it as soon as it came out of the box.
I got this one too.
So that's what kind of Hoya it is, and I wanted to plant it in this pot because it matches with the decor that I have at home, so that's kind of why I picked that one. With that, I'm going to cover how to tell if when a Hoya needs to be transplanted, the size of pot you should get, drainage, watering a little bit, and some of the soil type.
Is
And
this just for Hoyas or is this for houseplants in general?
it's a general houseplant video, but I'll probably cover a few specific things to Hoya just because I happen to be doing it.
Okay,
That makes sense.
perfect.
So, pot choice. There's a lot of different pots you can do. Some of the succulents do like more of the clay pots or terracotta. I find they dry out better, so something like a succulent, that would be beneficial. But something like a peace lily that's water hungry may not necessarily want to dry out that fast. So then plastic may be better. At least that's what I've always done. I don't know if you agree, Melissa.
Yep, I would agree with that too.
Okay, so that's what I do. So that's kind of types of pot. For pot size, you really want to do no more than 1 to 2 inches larger. Sometimes you can get away with a little bit bigger if you happen to have an aggressive plant, but something like a succulent or a Christmas cactus that doesn't have a lot of roots, they want to be not into a much bigger pot than what they are.
So can we show people like just that difference
Yeah.
there? Like not a whole lot bigger there, right?
So if I put that in, it's really not.
It's just a little bit, maybe like a half inch.
Yeah, and really, that's fine with this pot. We're going to see how pot bound it is when I take it off, but it is a lot deeper, so I'm getting some depth, room to grow that way, so to speak.
Cool. What are, can you tell me like what some signs are that your houseplant might need to be repotted?
Good question. So one would be roots coming out of the bottom. That is the most telltale sign. Also, a plant that dries out quickly, like a peace lily might be drying out every single day or every few days. That's a sign that it's ready to be transplanted. Or you see a lot of roots filling the top of the soil. Those aren't specific to every plant. There might be some that are more show one of those signs or the other, but those are the 3 most common ways.
Okay, cool.
So I'm going to pop this out and see how it looks inside.
Okay.
So I don't see any roots coming out of the bottom, so I'm
Okay.
wondering what it's like. We're going to find out.
Still gonna repot because you want it in a nicer pot regardless, right?
Yeah, in this
Okay.
case I'm doing it because I wanted something a little prettier, but before I take it out, let's say it really, really doesn't need to be transplanted, but I still want it in a pretty pot. You could just drop it in there. This would fall in too deep,
Yep.
but I could put some pebbles on the bottom maybe and set it in. It's the
Okay.
way I can get in with that, but I'm thinking that it's going to be, we'll find out when I unpot it.
Okay.
I'm thinking, and so there's at least, probably could have waited a little longer in there to be fuller, but there's enough roots that I'm comfortable saying that
It'll
this
be
will work
okay.
for this plant.
Okay.
So,
And that's in a really barky mixture, isn't it?
yes, it is. So this Hoya is a faster growing Hoya, so it probably doesn't need as much bark as some of the ones that are a little bit slower growing. I'm probably going to reuse some of that bark in the soil that I'm going
Okay.
to put in. This right here is one of the soils I grabbed as an example. It doesn't have a lot of bark in it, but if you have a Hoya or a plant that does need bark, you can always just get some orchid mix too and mix them together. I've done that to give it the air. That's what the bark is doing, by the way. It's providing air pores in there so that it's even more better draining than just a regular potting mix.
So it helps the roots like not stay too wet. Is that kind of what happens?
Yes, and it
Okay.
just gets air in between there. And some plants grow in conditions that are very barky, and they just like to stay in that even when they're in a houseplant pot like this.
Cool.
So I'm going to go ahead and grab some soil that's going to be comparable to the one in the bag. As I'm getting the soil, the other thing I wanted to mention about the container is the drainage.
Oh yeah, super important, right?
Yes, some pots don't have drainage. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that if you find a pot you got to have that won't work. But there are some plants that will do better in those conditions than others. Something like a Hoya, I would probably want it to have drainage.
Yes.
But
yeah.
something like a peace lily or a Dieffenbachia, those things are probably going to be a little bit better in a pot that doesn't have a drainage. Even like Dracaena, something like that would be fine.
So one of my tricks, like if I find a pot that I really have to have, is I actually will drill a hole in it.
How successful is that? Because I've always wondered, does it mess with the finish?
No. So you have to make sure you have the right drill bit for it. There's a couple different drill bits that will work. One is like a tile cutting bit, so like a bit that cuts through tile.
Okay.
There's also like a diamond tip one too, and we have both at my house and have used both quite successfully. Sometimes when you're trying to drill a hole in something like this that might be like a little bit thicker, putting some water on there because your drill will start to smoke can sometimes happen.
And you did this?
So yes, we have done this with a lot of my pots, and when I say we, my husband has been very good about helping with those projects for me, but it is feasible to do by yourself.
I was going to say, because I know that you're not as into tools as most, but if you can do it, I could do it.
Exactly.
And that means anybody could do it.
That's exactly right.
So as long as you have the right tools, you could totally drill a hole, it sounds like, in a pot. I've never tried it, so I'm glad that you gave those inputs on that one.
Yeah.
But do make sure some of the ones like succulents, Christmas cactuses, Hoyas, anything that holds water in its leaves basically or has a succulent leaf, even some of the philodendrons are probably going to want to have drainage. You can kind of tell because plants that stay wet longer when you water it probably want better drainage than plants that dry out quickly, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So I'm going to grab some soil and I'm going to I'm going to do about 3/4 of the way up the pot just because I feel like there's not a ton of roots on there, especially when it falls off. I'm going to take that bark that was in there with it and mix it in pretty good. So I want some bark in there. Put the little baby plant on top, trying to go for the same level it was before. So I'm not trying to bury it deeper or make it stick out further. Grab a little bit more of this while also grabbing some of the orchid mix that it was in. And the level, I'm kind of aiming for about 1/2 inch to an inch below the lip, so that when I water it, it won't just go over the sides, but it will actually go into the soil. That's going to be it. For the soil, I think I'm going to grab a little bit more of the bark and mix it in. I think it's looking pretty good.
Looks great. Do you have some tips for us on watering and carrying after you just done a repot?
Yes, I do. So Hoyas are kind of, I would consider more of like in a succulent realm. So anything like that's succulent, you can follow this rule. Wait 24 hours before you water it because the roots need time to callus over, especially for something like a cactus, a true cactus. Something like a peace lily, like I gave an example of earlier, or a dracaena or Fittonia. Those plants actually need to be watered right away because they will wilt pretty badly if you wait 24 hours. So it's kind of rules specific to each plant that I just gave.
Okay.
But this is a Hoya, so I'm going to wait overnight, probably even into the next day after that before I actually give it a good drink and it fills in. And then you just treat like a normal house plant after that. Keep in mind though that when you transplant to a bigger pot, if you have something that likes to stay dry, it's going to stay wet longer in a new pot because it has more volume and not a lot of roots growing in that soil yet. So just kind of watch it a little bit closer, and if you go on a schedule, maybe just check it instead of staying on that schedule because it might stay wetter and you don't want to have any problems with overwatering by going with the same schedule in a bigger pot. So do you have anything that I should add?
Nope, I think you covered everything really well, Derek. Thanks for the great information.
All right, so I'll just end with one more thing. This plant can probably stay in this pot for about another year or two before I'll have to transplant again. That rule of thumb will be different with every plant you do. I've had plants wait 6 or 7 years before I transplant, like a Christmas cactus, because they like to be in the same soil for a long time in the same pot. But something that grows quickly, like some of the wandering dudes, might want to be transplanted every year. Just kind of a quick example for that. So that's what I'm going to do with this one. I'm going to end the video there, and we'll see you in the next one. See ya.
Bye, guys.